all my clients are doing this. This changed my life. And this wasn't some, half-baked, if I can do it, you can do it kind of a thing. It was like, this is a very clear approach that is very flexible for you to be able to do what works for you at the point that you're at and not have to live in shame around the numbers in your business while you're making those changes. And that's why I stuck with it and why I have stuck with it for all these years.
You work hard in your business. On the Profit by Design podcast, we ask the big question: what has your business done for you lately? Hi, I'm Dr. Sabrina Starling, the business psychologist, the author of How to Hire the Best, and your co-host on the Profit by Design podcast. Weekly, my co-host, Mike Bruno, and I bring you tips, tools, and strategies from our own experiences and from the experiences of our guests, who are entrepreneurial thought leaders and real-life entrepreneurs, all to support you in making intentionally profitable and sustainable business decisions to live the lifestyle you desire. At Tap the Potential, we know you're longing to be freed from the constant demands of your business. You need a business that supports your life. And the problem is your business is taking over your life, leaving you frustrated and discouraged. We get it. At Tap the Potential, we believe work supports life, not the other way around. We understand you're paying a team, and most likely you're still having to do it all. There should be accountability. It should not be this hard, which is why, through our proprietary coaching system, we help thousands of business owners like you have more time for what's important to them and grow profit by 300 to 800%. Here's how we do it. Start by taking our assessment at tapthepotential.com/assessment. You'll get an overview of your current quality of life as it relates to your business and next steps needed in your business to improve your quality of life while strengthening your business. Next, meet with our success team lead to debrief your results. Then, join our Better Business, Better Life program. By the end of your first year with us, you will have more time for what matters to you and more money in your bank account than you've ever had before. So, if you're ready to take your life back, the next step is to take our assessment at tapthepotential.com/assessment. Profit designers, at Tap the Potential, we are on a mission right now to be a positive force in social media during trying times for all of us entrepreneurs. In that regard, I would love it if you could help us out. We really want to get behind any of you who are doing good things in your communities, showing up and leading with love. If you are doing something to keep your team together during this time and you're sharing it in social media, or you come across another entrepreneur who is being a gift from their gift in some way that you notice, please use the hashtags Lead with Love and Be a Gift. Our team at Tap the Potential is on the lookout in social media for those hashtags, and we will be reposting those social media posts from the Tap the Potential social media. Let's all lead with love, be a gift, and shine bright during these trying times. So Lisa, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be talking with you guys today.
Yes. So right off the bat, when you and I first started chatting a few minutes ago, you mentioned that we have a common connection in our friend, Mike Michalowicz.
Yes.
And I was sharing with Mike Bruno as he was coming in that you edited the first edition of Profit First. And you are actually in the second edition, which is the edition that's out there that everyone knows about now.
Yes, chapter 4.
To be in Profit First means that you had some struggle.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Because that's really what draws all of us to Profit First is we relate to the pain of the cash flow in our business not being where it needs to be. So would you share, how did you come to be in a place where you were confiding in Mike Michalowicz that, oh my gosh, this is awful?
Yeah, I wasn't. I was not confiding in anyone. but he was looking for volunteers to help edit the first edition of the book. And I was like, ooh, I get to read a book for free? Okay, sign me up. And so I'm reading through the book and I'm looking at the principles that he's laying out. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, nobody can do this. And so I sat down and started to, do the assessment on my own business. And I was livid. I was so angry. I was just like, this is wrong. You can't tell people this. Like, no one can do this. And then I kept reading the book as I was editing, and I was like, oh, okay. Because I had been a bootstrap entrepreneur from the jump, right? At this point, I've been online for about 25 years. And so I've seen a lot, done a lot, come and gone a lot. And was always like, profit was something that I got at the end of the year when I got my tax return, right? Like, that's how I knew I had profit. And so this whole idea of setting aside your profit first, I was like, where's that money going to come from? Like, I'm using that money to run the business, and I was paying myself, but I wasn't paying myself a living wage. And the more I read the book, the more angry I got, because I thought I was doing a good job at keeping my business going. And I clearly wasn't, because one, I wasn't paying myself a living wage. It wasn't sustainable. On paper, it was profitable, but it wasn't sustainable for me because I was basically a one-man show and had been trying to do everything myself for about a decade by the time I saw this book. And I was like, okay, so things have to change for me, and I don't even know how. And so I just kept going through the book as I'm editing it. So basically I was implementing before the book even came out. And that's how I ended up in the second edition, because I told Mike, I said, look, between the time I edited it and the time it was released, things shifted dramatically in my business, because I started thinking differently about the money that was coming in and making different choices about how to allocate those funds. Instead of saying, well, I've got $500 in the bank and I've got to pay $500 worth of bills, it was like, well, I've got $500 in the bank. Half of that I get to keep to spend on me. That's my paycheck, which blew my mind. I was like, that was such a foreign concept to me. And I remember my first profit distribution, it was less than $1, because I was like 99.999% on expenses. And I had just, was slowly changing those percentages to get myself to where I was comfortable. And by the time the second edition was about to come out, I had told him, I said, now, because of the way my business runs, I can do 15 or 20% profitability and not even blink, because everything is set up to run to take care of me and my company. And, I just put the rest of it in the vault and just let it sit there, so that I have the money to do what I need to do. And I guess that inspired him enough to be like, let's put you in the book. And I'm like, okay. So that's the journey. But I mean, I wasn't like, oh, Mike, help me. It was like, I don't want anybody to know how hard this is for me. And I didn't have any choice, because his book opened my eyes. And then I was like, well, all right, let's try this. And so I ran with it for about 6 months. And now I actually became one of the first certified profit first business coaches in the world when it first rolled out. And so I was like, all my clients are doing this. Everybody I know I'm telling about this. This changed my life. And this wasn't some, half-baked, if I can do it, you can do it kind of a thing. It was like, this is a very clear approach that is very flexible for you to be able to do what works for you at the point that you're at, and not have to live in shame around the numbers in your business while you're making those changes. And that's why I stuck with it, and why I have stuck with it for all these years.
That is so powerful. And there's a couple of things that you said that really struck a chord for me. And when you mentioned twice, you didn't want anybody to know how hard this was for you.
Oh, yeah.
I remember that feeling myself. And I thought, I'm a business coach. I can't figure out the money, especially as the revenue grows, like where things are supposed to go. And there was just such intense, I'm like an idiot. Like, why can't I figure this stuff out?
Oh, yeah.
And so I hear you say that. What was that for you? What was that shame for you?
I think that the words that I used were, how come I can help all my clients make 6, 7, 8, 9 figures, and I'm struggling to keep my nose above water? Like, what is going on there? And part of it was pricing, because I had some shame around money stuff. But the other part of it was, the money was going out faster than it was coming in some of the ways that I was plowing all the money back into the business. And so I didn't have a lifestyle for myself. And the minute I shifted that, it was like, oh, I can have a lifestyle. I can do the things that matter to me, and I don't have to put all the money back in the business. And so, I was able to shift my pricing. I was able to do a lot of things differently in how I showed up in the marketplace. Because I've been at this for, 20 plus years. And I started with people who typically don't have a lot of money, direct sellers, creative entrepreneurs, stay-at-home moms, people who are already strapped for cash and didn't have a lot of money to play with. But the longer I stayed in business, other people kept showing up. And what I learned was they were playing Moneyball with me. And I had never changed my pricing because of the original audience that I had been working with. And so that was a big piece of the problem for me, business-wise, about I'm helping people make lots of money. Where is it for me? But then too, it was like that recognition of 99.9% of the money I'm making was expenses, and that needed to shift. And I'm fortunate in that the shift happened quickly for me because I was angry. And when I get angry, stuff gets done, worlds move. And so that just having that resource to be able to tap into it, say, all right, well, let's run with this for 6 months and see where it goes. That really changed things fairly quickly for me.
So what made you angry? What piece?
Well, reading the assessment and looking at the numbers and the recommendations for this is how you should allocate your money, knowing that that wasn't what I was doing in my own business, nor was it what I was advocating to my clients. I'm like, it made me mad because I was like, there's no way in God's green earth I could ever do this. This is what it takes to be successful. There's no way. And there was a way. It just had to do it and, stick with it and follow through and be ruthlessly honest about what was really important and necessary in the business, what was going to help the business be profitable and sustainable. And for me, that means being able to do what you love without having to sell your soul to do it, to have the money and the time to be able to enjoy the money that you're making, which I know is something that you guys talk about, the 4-week vacation and everything. So, that idea of having that level of freedom was not my reality at that time. And that's what made me angry. It was like, I have to do that in order to get there? No way. But I recognized in myself this anger, like, well, okay, before you blow it all away, maybe you should finish reading the book and find out what he has to say and maybe try some things. So I did. And, slowly it started to work. And like I said, I went from 99.9999999% expenses down to, well within the suggested allocation percentages. So that I was like, oh, it does work. Huh, how about that?
I think it's really important, in listening to everything that you're saying, the importance of looking at the power of clarity, right? I know in my own experience, having that fear created anxiety. And in a lot of cases, it was a paralyzing anxiety that made me, more frantic. My behavior was frantic, my inability to make decisions and move the business forward in different directions. But once I stripped it down and I looked at, really, these are my expenses, this is my income, this is what I need to make, you start to get all this clarity, and that clarity then rebuilds the confidence so that when you are having those pricing discussions and you are thinking about your pricing, you're like, well, you know what? I don't want to be that 99.999% expense business. I want to be the 50% expense business and X amount of percent profit.
Right. And I'll tell you right now that because I was able to make those shifts this year with everything that's happened with the virus that shall not be named, my business has been very stable. I've been very lucky and very blessed that we haven't had a huge tank, and we've had clients who've done exceptionally well this year. But if we had been leveraged up to our nostrils and every penny was going out for expenses, we wouldn't have that breathing room. We wouldn't have that safety net. We wouldn't be able to make decisions from a place of confidence and clarity versus a place of fear and scarcity, which is what a lot of people are doing right now for obvious and valid reasons.
That's such a big distinction, making decisions from clarity versus fear and scarcity. So clarity and abundance and not even abundance, but sufficiency. Like there is enough to be able to come out of this. So I want to point out some unique things about you as a guest on the Profit by Design podcast. You are an accomplished musician. Your business is all about helping creatives define and achieve success on their own terms. And that means designing their businesses to be sustainably profitable. So with your background, I really would love for you to speak some to, first off, how do we know if we're a creative? And what are some unique challenges that creatives experience as entrepreneurs?
Sure. So in my work, I tell people that all entrepreneurs are creative, but not all creatives are entrepreneurs. And that's the key distinction, because creativity doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's not you are creative or you aren't creative. It's where do you fall on creativity spectrum? What type of creativity is your zone of genius, right? So I developed this spectrum that I call the creative entrepreneur type spectrum, so that you can identify where you fall, what your strengths are, what your skill set is, and what your challenges are, because each creative type shows up in the world differently and responds to the world differently based on how they're wired, for lack of a better word. So on one end of the spectrum, you have very linear creatives. These are typically thought leaders, designers, innovators, inventors. They're pattern finders, and they don't typically identify themselves as creatives. Although you're developing a framework, you're developing a system, you're developing a process that's very creative, innovative, inventive work. They don't typically self-identify as creatives. On the far end of the spectrum in the other direction, we have what I call the chaotic creatives. These are very nonlinear people. They tend to go with their flow. They trust their gut. They lean into intuition heavily. And for them, it's all about the experience, having an experiential existence, right? Even for their clients, they want to have that wow factor for their clients. And in the middle are these fusion types. And fusion creatives kind of straddle both worlds. And I'm a fusion type. We both love and hate the things that come with those packages. On the one hand, there's a time and a place for systems and order and structure and processes, and we love that stuff. And then on the other hand, if we stay there too long, we start freaking out, because we got to have that time to rest and recover and feed our souls and lean into our intuition and trust our gut and all of that. We need that. And and the joke that I make is, we want it perfect, on time, and under budget yesterday. That's a fusion creative. We struggle with perfectionism and comparisonitis, but we also recognize that there's a need for both. We need to have systems and processes in order, because that keeps things moving. But we get paralyzed because we look at these two different worlds and go, well, I'm not as creative as these chaotics, and I'm not as organized as these linears, so I'm not perfect. I should just not ship. But fusions are really good at a lot of different things. The examples that I like to give that people can tend to identify with is, on the linear end of the spectrum, you have your Warren Buffetts and your Bill Gateses. On the chaotic end of the spectrum, you have your Lady Gagas. And then in the middle, you have like the Eagles. They were all powerhouse artists in and of themselves as soloists, but then they all come together and they create amazing music together, but only one person sings lead at a time. And that's the challenge of a fusion creative, is trying to figure out, what do I lead with? Because I want to do all these things and I'm good at all these things. Well, you've got to put one thing out front so that people know what to know you for, and then you can change things up if you want to. And between those extremes in the middle, we have these cusp types. Cusp types demonstrate some fusion tendencies, but when the chips are down, they still lean into either chaotic or linear, depending on which kind of cusp they are, because when things get really stressful, they lean into that primary type. So when things are hard and you're a chaotic cusp type, you're going to trust your intuition. You're going to lean into guidance. You're going to look for the experiential stuff that's always serves you well. But if you're a linear cusp type, like Mike Michalowicz, it's about, well, what do the numbers say? What are the processes? What are the orders? This stuff hasn't failed us before. Let's just keep doing what we've always been doing so that we can keep getting what we've always got.
Wow. So as you were talking, Mike Bruno and I were on video so we can see each other. And I immediately saw him like recognition, like, that's me. So Mike, what did you identify with in what Lisa was sharing?
I just think that's a phenomenal perspective on compartmentalizing, I guess, those, the psychic part of it. I definitely feel like I'm in the middle, because I'm a systems guy and I appreciate, order and structure, but at the same time, I like playing on the other side too. And I kind of bounce back and forth. And I think, from a personal development and growth perspective, if, folks can identify, with exactly what you laid out, they can find some peace and probably, really it'll help them grow in one way or the other, instead of kind of feeling like you're lost, or you're just kind of, I don't really know what I am, should I do this? Should I do that? And then you feel out of place.
Well, and it also helps them recognize what their strengths are, right? So if you're a linear type and you're really good at systems and processes, Don't try to write your creative copy. Don't try to design your website. Like, hire that stuff out to somebody who can speak your language and really bring you to light so that you don't have to stress out over that. And likewise, if you're a chaotic creative and the numbers and the schedules and the processes feel like a prison to you, then get help with that stuff so that you don't have to feel like you're chained to the numbers all the time. Now, that doesn't give you permission to ignore those things, right? Just because they're not in your zone of genius. But having the right help and the right support in the right places in your business means you can focus on the stuff that you're really good at and trust somebody else on your team to do the work that isn't in your zone of genius so that you can live more comfortably there.
You know, that is, you say it so succinctly, it sounds so easy. It's not easy to implement, but it has such a profound effect. And I'm thinking about our EOS Focus Day that we had on the Tap the Potential team a couple of weeks back. And we went through and we made a new role chart again, and we looked at it from the perspective of the key roles, and the visionary and integrator seats were the ones that were kind of up there. And we had to go through, each of us on the leadership team, and say if we wanted the seat. And it had to be a hell yes response. And so visionary for me is like, hell yes, I'll do that all day long. And as we defined the integrator seat, which is more of the systems and making sure everything's flowing and tracking and all of that, as much as I like to use those systems, I don't want to run those systems, and I certainly don't want to create those systems. And so for me to just acknowledge that, I don't want this seat, it is not a hell yes for me, was so freeing. And my fear when I did that was, and I looked around on the leadership team, I'm like, who else is going to want this? This is kind of a sucky job. Like, oh,
Who wants this? I don't like it. Who else could possibly like it? Yeah.
And out of left field, one of our team members says, I would really love to do this. I just was like, what? And she was so excited about it. And the more she talked, and then we went around as a team and voted, and we all were like, totally, she's got what she needs to be able to do this. So we came out of that meeting, and the 2 weeks since then, I have felt such energy freed up that I can just own the visionary seat and be my happy little self over here doing my thing. And it's been fantastic. So there's so much power in knowing your creative type. And you talked some about, the opportunities to use strengths. What are the pitfalls if we aren't aware of our type? What happens then?
Yeah. So one of the big problems that occurs for any creative is because of the strengths of their type, that can also, if you overclock them, becomes one of the problems of your type. Is if you're so focused on experience and everything's about experience, well, then budget goes out the window, schedule goes out the window, deadline goes out the window, people go out the window. You start hurting feelings because you're so fixated on it's got to look and feel just like this. And, you can come across as the Wicked Witch of the West because you want things to be a certain way. And, Steve Jobs is a classic example of a guy who's like, it has to be exactly like this. And everybody around him was like, he's such a visionary, but he's such a tool, And then the other side of the spectrum, if you're linear and you're overclocking your linear nature, it's all about systems and deadlines and processes, and we've got to hit the goal. It becomes a no matter what scenario where all you want is to hit the number, and people go out the window right away. Right? You sacrifice your own health and well-being because this is classic type A behavior. It's like, I'm just going to keep working because we've got to hit a deadline, and who needs sleep? I'll sleep when I'm dead. That whole energy starts to show up in the business. As a fusion creative, paralysis sets in and things don't get done. You don't ship. You don't get projects finished. You get them half started and then they sit there and they never get brought to market. Or they get brought to market and then you stop selling them right away because you're on to the next thing. Ooh, bright, shiny. Shiny object syndrome is huge for fusion creatives because we have a natural tendency to either want to please or want to learn or both. And when we're in that environment, it's like, well, I've mastered this. What's next? What's next? What's next? We become box checkers and we never take the time, or credential collectors, and we never take the time to celebrate our success. Sometimes we don't even see it as success because we've got more boxes to check, where there's more stuff in the inbox, so we just got to keep going, right? And it's different than type A because type A is like, no matter what, no matter what. And for us, it's like, well, it's just more stuff. It's more. It feels different. It comes across differently for us. And we tend to hurt fewer people because we tend to do it all ourselves. We end up becoming the bottleneck in the business. We end up overworked ourselves and fatigued ourselves because we're not delegating appropriately. We're not assigning out tasks appropriately. We're not deleting things from our task list appropriately because we're like, well, I've got 15 seconds. I can solve 3 world crises and get my kids to school on time. I mean, I'm a fusion creative. We get shit done. So,
I'm relating. I think my kids too. I'm seeing the nodding going on. So you, on your website, you have a quiz that our profit designers can take to identify their creative type. Can you tell us about the link and what they're going to learn when they take that quiz?
Sure. You can go to lisarobinyoung.com/quiz. You can also just go straight to the homepage, and right across the front it says, what's your creative entrepreneur type? Take the quiz. There's no opt-in required. You take the assessment. I think there's about 20 questions. You identify the way you think about the different scenarios that are presented to you. And at the end, it kicks back a result that tells you this is your type. And it gives you a brief summary, kind of some of the things that we've talked about. If you want to go deeper, then you can opt in and get a full report that explains not just your type, but all the types, so that you can see kind of how you fit into the mix. And if you've got other people that you're working with, sometimes it's helpful to be able to understand their language as well.
Absolutely, especially if you have team members. So I want to go there next with you, because creative entrepreneurs, I've worked with some of them, and getting them to hire team is like pulling teeth. Oh my goodness. Because what I usually hear back is, no one understands what I do better than what I do. No one can represent me as well as I can. They won't get it. And I don't have time. I don't want to train people. I don't want to have systems. So I would love to hear you, Lisa, speak to, first off, how do you know when it's time to level up and hire a team? And what happens for a creative entrepreneur as they start to hire a team?
So first, I want to circle back to what I heard you say that you hear people say, and bet that half of those people are probably fusion creatives and the other half are probably chaotic creatives, or somewhere on that end of the spectrum. Because if nobody can do it like me, that's an experiential issue, right? Or a knowledge issue. And fusion creatives are notorious for, I'm going this fast and I don't want to slow down, and having to train somebody means I'm going to have to slow down, and it's just faster and easier if I do it myself. In the short term, that is very true. And that's the problem. Because it really is easier for you to just do it yourself and go faster in the short term, you never slow down enough to train somebody else to pick up the slack on that stuff so that you can get it off your plate and focus on other things. And this was a lesson I had to learn as I was growing my organization, because I was like, no, it really is faster if I just do it myself. It'll take me 7 minutes, but it'll take me 25 to train you and create a process document and make sure you've done it right and all that stuff. What I had to do, and what I do with my clients, is remind them it's 25 minutes now versus 7 minutes every time for the rest of forever. And when you are small and agile and you've got 4 or 5 clients, or you're working with less than 6 figures, that's probably not a big deal. But you have to look at, and this is what I've started to train my clients to do, is look at what you're doing now and multiply it by 10 or 50, because that's what's going to happen when your business scales up. And if you can't manage it with 10 times the amount of business or 50 times the amount of business, which is very, very realistic for somebody who's starting from almost nothing and starting to grow something, right? If you can't do it at 10x or 50x, you've got to get it off your plate. And it's better to start creating those process documents now and getting those things so that they're easy to train now, than to wait until you're overloaded and there's no way you can take time. Plus, once you've done it and you've got somebody that can come in and run those things, you can then ask them to train the next person so that you don't have to. And as soon as that light bulb comes on, they're like, oh, okay, what can I offload next? Right? And that's the big thing. And the other thing that I hear a lot is, well, how do I even afford that? Like, where do I find the money for that? And so I want to hit that one, because that's the one that I hear chaotics use a lot is, well, that would be great, but money. And here's the thing that I want people to remember is that you don't have to hire a full-time employee as your very first hire. I think that's the mindset is I've got to hire an employee to get help. And I'm going to have to cut full-time with benefits. No, you can start with a single task and offload that to a VA or a bookkeeper or a housekeeper if you need to start by delegating inside your house first, right? If you're a small business. As you get bigger, then you've got people that you can start asking help. But when you're just getting started, sometimes you have to look for ways to delegate inside the home before you delegate inside the business. And that comes out of your owner pay. And you have to recognize that. Oh, well, then that means I got to pay myself more. Oh, that means I need to grow the business a little bit more. Oh, I need to change my prices. And when they start to see how the threads connect, they start to recognize, oh, I don't have to do this all by myself. Oh, there is a way that I can do this that gets me off the stick and gets me started. And I don't have to have a team of 25 people tomorrow. I can start with one person on one project and see where it goes from there. Once they get the delegation bug, though, once they've been bitten, then they're just like, oh my God, why didn't I do this a long time ago? Like, I should have done this years ago. Because they start to see how delegating that one task not only frees them up, but costs them less in the process. So it's a win-win for them. And they're getting somebody who's qualified to do the work. So now they can focus their time and that rest of that money on other things.
Yes. And, I've been teaching how to hire the best for years now. And every year I always have new insights. And one of my big insights currently around how to hire the best is that we really don't give enough credit to how much energy it drains from us when we are working outside our strengths. We minimize that impact and we tell ourselves, I really don't like cleaning my toilets, but I'll do it anyway because I don't want to pay somebody to do that. I really don't like doing my own bookkeeping, but I can do it. It's just a few hours a week, no big deal. Well, the things we don't like to do, we procrastinate, and then we feel bad about those things, and then we start doubting ourselves. And self-doubt is a nasty thing because we don't just doubt ourselves in one area like, oh, I stink at doing the bookkeeping in my business. We make it global and we say, I stink. I'm a terrible business owner. My money, I don't have any track of it and I don't know what's going on in my business. And it just becomes this nasty thing.
Yeah, if I'm bad at one thing, I'm a bad person. And it's like, I'm bad at everything if I'm a bad person. Yeah. I know it.
And before you know it, it's not just impacting the business, it's impacting our personal relationships and our overall life satisfaction. So, the self-doubt, slippery slope. So everything that you're saying, Lisa, about delegating and paying attention to the things that are not your zone of genius and look at getting those off your plate, like I cannot underscore that enough. And especially for creatives, because what gets freed up is our creative energy.
Yeah, exactly. When I was doing the research for my book, I interviewed a woman who had, at that point in her life, she had essentially retired. She basically career shifted, but she career shifted in the most unusual and glorious way. Her whole life, her whole work career, she had worked in language, i.e. she wanted to travel the world, and she wanted to do all these really cool things. But she had grown up in a teeny tiny little town in Germany. And the only way out was through foreign language. So she learned foreign language and she ended up working, I think, with a consulate. I can't remember for sure off the top of my head, but she ended up working in a government agency as a translator, doing a lot of stuff that she enjoyed in terms of having conversations and making connections, a very chaotic thing for her because she was wired as a chaotic. Well, then she started to promote. And as she promoted through the company, she was given more leadership roles that required more linear tasks, things like setting up systems, cross-training, delivering new systems and setting up a lot of things that really weren't in her zone of genius. She was living and working inside the linear. And here's the thing that I like to tell people, your creative entrepreneur type denotes your preference, not your proficiency. Okay, you can get really good at something just because you've been doing it for a long time. And that doesn't mean it lights you up. It doesn't mean it fills you up. In fact, for her, she's like, I came home every night so drained because it basically used up all her spoons. She's like, I had nothing left to give. And she decided on a whim to take a salsa dancing class. And that class opened the door to a whole new world for her. and she left language and now she just dances. And I said, so what's it like learning the steps? She's like, oh, I don't learn steps. I have a partner and he just moves me around the floor. And I'm like, that is such a chaotic thing. I mean, it's like perfect. She doesn't have to learn about systems and processes and steps and orders and turns and choreography. She's like, I just hold his hand and he moves me around the floor. And she's in her zone of genius. She's like, I am so alive and I am so vibrant and I am so happy and things are so great. And that's what it's like when you're in your zone of genius on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a wonderful feeling. So you are doing something really interesting in your business and you teach others to do it as well. And I'm very intrigued, and that is running a pay for results offer.
Yeah. So the Creative Freedom Incubator, we launched it about 4 or 5 years ago now. And the primary goal at its onset was to work with creative business owners and help them get their businesses off the ground. Much like a business incubator in the tech world or the healthcare world, you see a lot of those. You don't see so many for creatives. And this has kind of been a dream of mine since I was a kid, was like, there should be a way to like, for businesses to help each other and like grow and, make creative projects and all of that. So we launched this incubator and we had, I think, 5 or 6 people the first time we launched it. And in the first 3 years, people who were basically starting from zero, we did about $500,000 in real revenue. And that's Mike's term, real revenue, from the profit first world. So I was really excited about being able to help them grow their businesses. And since then, we've expanded and shifted the business model so that not only do we still have the opportunity to serve these entrepreneurs, and it's a very hands-on approach, right? So we actually get into the business and help them create these systems and help them build the processes and help them learn how to think like a business owner instead of, I'm just a creative and I want to do my thing, man, and worry about the money later. Like, that's not profitable or sustainable. Here's how to think like a business owner. Here's how to grow the business in a way that's in alignment with who you are, what you stand for, and what matters to you, both in your life and in the world. And so for me, it's about helping people become better humans and better business owners by doing something that they love in a way that works for who they are and how they show up in the world. And so that's how we started this. And, when I started it, I was like, I don't know if this is going to work, but I figure this is better than nothing. My premise was, if I'm as good as I say I am, I'm going to make good money because I'm getting a percentage of their net sales, of their real revenue, right? I'm going to get a percentage of that every single month as they're doing well. And if they're not doing well, then that's either something that's not going right in the business or it's a reflection on me. And I shouldn't be getting paid very well if things aren't working the way that I said that they should be working. And so we're now, like I said, 5 years in, and we've grown the business so that it's not all hands-on now. We have a couple of different levels that we work with people at, but it's still all pay for results. We have a couple of options where you don't have to pay for results, because we've had some people come through the business who are like, I'm actually doing really well and I just want to coach with you. I don't need the hands-on pieces. And I'm like, that's fine. If you just want to pay me money, I'm happy to take that too. But I had seen so many people, particularly creatives, going into these year-long programs for, high 5, 6 figures, and they weren't ready for it. They didn't really have anything. They were putting everything on their credit card, and they were coming out the other side going, I'm, 5 figures in the hole and my business is doing nothing. And there was an old commercial that said, I fix $6 haircuts. And I'm like, I fixed the 6-figure, mastermind problem, right? Like, that was like, come here, let me help you. We'll get this sorted out and we'll fix your wagon. And so I was like, well, but I don't want to charge coaching fees if I'm going to get that kind of a turnaround for them. Like, there should be some reciprocity here. But because it was untested and because I didn't know, and I was still dealing with money shame stuff, I'm like, well, we'll just start it at like $50 a month and see what happens. And like I said, we did $500,000. Yeah, $500,000 in the first 3 years. And I'm like, okay, it's time to do this right now. And so it's still about a little more than 50% of my annual revenue comes from the pay for results model in the business. I mean, I sell books, I do speaking, I do performances. So I have these other ancillary things that support my income. But to me, that's evidence that a pay for results model works when you set it up right in the first place. And we've taken our time to really set it up in a way that serves our clients. And we have people who continue with us year after year. And we have people who graduate who are like, I'm complete. I got everything I need. I can run my business like a business owner and I'm making six figures. I'm making, mid to high six figures. I'm making something. They're really happy with where they're at. They have that sense of enoughness that we were talking about right at the beginning, right? It's like, I feel like I have arrived in a space where things feel like I have plenty and I can do what I want to do and live how I want to live and have that sense of creative freedom, which is what I'm all about in the first price.
So I love this, because there are so many people who have been burned by very expensive masterminds, and
I was one of them.
They were I've done the same thing. And so the opportunity that for a new client coming in to pay for results, and I love that you're offering options, because I think about our clients in the Better Business, Better Life program at Tap the Potential. If we were to do a pay for results program, they actually might end up paying us more than they're paying currently. However, I think, with our Better Business, Better Life program, the challenge is that they pay up front. And so it is. So I'm just really intrigued by the idea of, we could offer options and people could have an alternative way. So you track it off of real revenue. How do you hold your clients accountable for that? Like, what is your accountability mechanism there?
Sure. So part of what's happening inside the incubator is it's a blend of hands-on. We're like in the business doing work. So we're seeing what's going on inside the business, but then it's also one-on-one coaching directly with me. So we're checking in at least 2, sometimes 4 times a month. Where are you at? What's going on? So it's not like they're going to hide their revenue from me.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, I'm going to know, you had 3 client calls this week. Great. I know that's revenue. Right. And so then at the end of every month, they send me a sales report. And we do the calculations from the sales report. So it's a little bit on your honor, but it's also like, I can tell if you're showing up and doing the work or if you're not showing up and doing the work. Like, I stalk your social media. So if you're telling me you just had a 6-figure month, I'm like, Lisa's getting paid this month. Like, I just know that, right? Because I'm involved and I'm committed. We don't take on 10,000 clients in this program. So I have a relationship with each of these people and they have a relationship with me. And I think that not only helps grow the business, it also helps them recognize they're not in this alone anymore. They've got someone who's just as vested in their success as they are, right? Like, I want them to succeed as much as they want to succeed. So I naturally want to be helping them along. And the best part for me about the incubator, and I think for my clients too, is that I really am a guide and a help. I'm not a partner. I don't make the decisions, they do. And so they have to learn how to do that. It also means if they decide that they want to jump ship and do something else, they can, and they're not beholden to me because I don't own a piece of their company, right? And so that makes a big difference. With a lot of incubators, you're in an incubator, they're taking a percentage of the goal is let's get it running so that we can then sell it. And I'm like, that's not what we do here. So.
Yeah, it's definitely a interesting concept to bring to the coaching world, I think. There's a lot of other industries that obviously do it, but I really like that. I can see how, especially for creatives and, for people that are trying to wrap their head around their roadmap and where they're trying to take the business, to have that, that help early on, and then, it's paid as the business progresses and things are more profitable. And that's really awesome. And just a quick question, if you wouldn't mind answering it. So historically for you, when you balance out what you would charge if you're charging up front, as opposed to on the back end, what you're seeing, is it level? Are you seeing more? Are you seeing less?
I'm actually seeing more overall. As you add all the numbers, there are a handful of clients who they're in for a year, they get what they need and they're gone, and it's just about break even. We never lose money. I can be clear on that one. We've never lost money on a client, but we've had a few where we've come close to break even just because of the way the calendar works out, because it's a year-long commitment. And if they're at the end of the year and they're like, yeah, I'm feeling complete. Okay, well, that's good. Then we're done. But we've set it up so that there is a minimum monthly retainer that comes out of whatever the percentage is, so that we know that our costs are covered every month, regardless of what the business is doing. But it's still nowhere near what you're paying for a year-long program at the high five figures. But for us, it's done 2 things. One, it's trained our clients to expect that they're going to have to make an investment. And each year that they're in the program, their investment goes up because the results are going up. So that by the time they're ready to graduate, they recognize the value of investing $700, $800, $1,000, $10,000 a month in working with somebody, or using that money to have their team support them. They've already been training themselves to set that money aside to support the growth of their business, so that when they walk away, that money's there for them, right? And then for us, yeah, we're seeing a positive return. And it's bared out for me that I am getting paid more than I would have gotten paid if I'd just been a coach, coaching whoever showed up, as a creative. It's like, well, put your money where your mouth is. That was always my thing. I'm like, if you really think you're that good, then put your money where your mouth is. And so that's what we've done. And like I said, about half of my revenue is coming from working with clients in this capacity, and I wouldn't trade it because it's wonderful.
That's fascinating. So I know in our work with clients, when we help them get more profitable, they're making more money than they're used to having. There's literally more money in their bank account than they've ever had before. And you have that experience with your clients too. You're working on a book, and one of the themes in your book is the courage to be rich. So dig into that a bit with us. What are you finding?
Yeah, so this started with a conversation, and especially right now, there's a lot of conversations about, I travel in some socially conscious entrepreneurial circles, and the concept of, can you be rich and can you be ethical at the same time? Can you be a good person and have money? And we really deconstructed through these conversations that I was having with people about, what does it even mean to be rich? And your definition of rich determines your worldview around whether or not you can be rich and ethical. And so for the people who were experiencing richness as a state of plenty, more than enough, right? Comfortable, because let's be honest, almost all of us in the United States, if you're making more than $50,000 a year, the last time I looked, you're in the top 10% of wealth in the world. So you are rich, and you're like, it doesn't feel like rich to me. I got you. Locally rich is different than globally rich. And you have to recognize that that's part of that definition of rich. So how are you defining richness for yourself? And what is the path that you take to richness for yourself? And so I've spent the last few years interviewing 7, 8, 9-figure, financially successful, I'll put successful in quotation marks, what we would typically construe as a successful person, interviewing those people, talking to my clients, other people and colleagues that I've worked with to get their sense of what does it take to become successful in that manner, and identify these 9 steps that kind of get you there. But they're built around 3 concepts, and we've already talked about 2 of them: clarity and confidence. Right? You've got to have clarity, because that's what triggers the ability to take steps in confidence. And as you grow your confidence, that's where you do the courageous actions. And the courageous actions are things like facing down your fears, being willing to make changes. Like, those are the tiny little differences between the rest of the world and the people who we see as successful, right? The people that we see as rich. They're willing to face down fears that the rest of the world is like, I'm comfortable. We're not going to go there today, right? If you're not willing to face down your fears, if you're not willing to be uncomfortable and make those decisions and say, look, I was wrong. I got to be willing to be wrong and shift gears, right? And make amends and do what's right and keep moving. If you're not willing to do those things, you're going to have a really hard time breaking through the level of sameness in the world to achieve richness, to achieve wealth. And so that's what the new book, it's called The Courage to Be Rich. That's what the new book is going to be covering, is like, what are these key steps? What are these distinguishing factors between, regular entrepreneurs and people who are truly successful? Like, what is that path to creative freedom? And that's what the book talks about.
That is fascinating, just because it really is about the courage to step outside our comfort zone. And what's coming to mind is Darren Hopman on our team has been leading our team and our retreat alumni through an exercise around money. And so every day, either on the Facebook group or in our Slack channel, he's posting, congratulations, today you won $1,000. What will you do with it? And so over 2 weeks' time, that amount has gotten bigger and bigger. And he's asked us to pay attention to, so first off, most everyone on our team was like, I'm saving it. I'm like, yeah, you good profit first people. You've got it. We save it. And then Darren said, no. You're not allowed to save it. Now what are you going to do? And we're all kind of like, oh, huh. And it's really generated a lot of discussion. And for me, as the amounts got bigger and bigger, it's been kind of eye-opening to think, These are some really, like, I think the other day it was $999,000. And I thought, wow, what if I couldn't save any of it and I had $999,000? What would I do with that? And I firmly believe that if we want money to show up in our world, we need to know what to do with it. And that's one of the beautiful things about Profit First is it gives us a clear plan of any dollar that comes into the business. We all know where those dollars are going because we're following Profit First. So in terms of generating abundance, I really think we have to look at what is our plan? What would we do with these things? And it takes courage. It brings up blocks. It brings up gremlins. It brings up, it really challenges us to expand our thinking.
For sure. If we're pushing the boundaries on what the rest of the world thinks is what we should be doing, living in the shoulds, shooting on ourselves, you probably heard that one too. When we start to push the boundaries on that, there's a level of discomfort that comes. But here's the thing. Choices have consequences, and you have to be willing to accept the consequences of your choices, whether that choice is to stay where it's comfortable, where everybody else is, or push beyond what's comfortable into what you know you're being called into, right? The things that you know you're wired for. Playing to your strengths and to the exclusion of other things takes a level of courage that most people can't own up to. Right? Beyonce is not doing all of the things in her business. Beyonce goes and trains. Beyonce eats, sleeps, and sings. Like Beyonce is in her zone of genius as much as possible and lets everybody else handle this stuff. And that's why Beyonce is Beyonce. And that's why I'm me. Like I'm still doing some of those things myself, learning how to free myself up from the things that aren't in my zone of genius. Right? We look at people who are ultra mega sports stars or ultra mega superstars and people who are at that quote unquote, that level. And we don't recognize that all it takes are a couple of decisions that move us out of our comfort zone. And then a couple more decisions that move us a little farther, because every time we expand our comfort zone, we've got a new comfort zone. So we have to keep pushing just a little and not a lot, because like a balloon, you can only stretch so far or you're going to snap or you're going to bust, right? And so you have to stretch it gradually. You have to stretch it a little at a time. This isn't about totally making over your business tomorrow. It's about what's the one small thing that you can do that pushes against that fear, that helps you play into your zone of genius, that helps you let go of the things that you were wrong about so that you can refocus. Do that one little thing now and see what happens. And then do another little thing, and then another little thing. And pretty soon you're miles beyond where everybody else is at because you were willing to face the consequences of that tiny little choice over and over and over again.
Small steps forward taken in a consistent direction lead to big change over time. And I love how you're breaking that down for us to say, today, what is that one small thing that pushes you just a bit outside your comfort zone? Go and do that. I think that's a wonderful challenge for all of us to think about. Mike, as we wrap up with Lisa, what are some of your big takeaways from this discussion today?
For sure. I mean, I really like, the whole creative spectrum. I think that's also very useful in dealing with partners, employees, people in general, right? Just having that other, viewpoint and perspective and understanding that, there is a simplistic reason why people are a certain way. It's complicated, but it's pretty simple the way you outlined it. That, and certainly, just that, clarity is probably, it's an ever moving target, right? So just like you were talking about, we reach a certain level of, being comfortable and clarity, and we have to just tweak it and tweak it and just keep growing and, just chase success and whatever that means and change the definition of it. And I really loved listening to everything you had to share. We really appreciate it.
It's a very inspiring and enlightening conversation today, Lisa. So as we go out, I want to give you the chance one more time to share your website, because that is where people can take the quiz to discover their creative type.
Absolutely. You can find me at lisarobinyoung.com. Robin has 2 B's or you won't find me.
Thank you for clarifying that. I'm sure our listeners will want to make sure to get that one right so they can get the quiz. So thank you again, Lisa. It's been wonderful talking with you.
Likewise. Thanks, guys.
If your business is taking over your life and you're ready to take your life back, Tap the Potential's Better Business, Better Life program could be just what you're looking for. By the end of your first year in our program, you will have more time for what matters to you and more money in your bank account than ever. Get started. Take our assessment at tapthepotential.com/assessment. Thank you for spending time with us today. Join our conversation in the Profit by Design podcast Facebook group. Share your thoughts on today's episode, ask us questions, and let us know what you want to hear about next. Visit our website at profitbydesignpodcast.com to access resources from our sponsors and tools we've created for you. Subscribe to the show on whatever platform you're listening to right now. There's a subscribe button right there. Go ahead and hit it so that you always get a notification when we release a new episode. And finally, share our podcast with a friend if you know a friend who would enjoy it. Thanks again for listening. This is real life business. Keep your chin up, keep moving forward. You got this.